Welcome to the Rebekah Panepinto Project. Today, I am very excited to host Doug Saunders. Doug is a 25-year technology veteran and the Chief Information Officer at Arctic Glacier. They are the leading packaged ice company owned by the Carlyle Group. Now, at Arctic Glacier, Doug oversees the company's technology strategy and leads the Strategic Project Management Office. Doug has a very interesting background in that he holds degrees in political science and Russian history from the University of Alabama. He shares how this background and his incredible career journey has led him to be able to make the impact he's making today. We also talk a lot about how he is using IoT devices and edge computing to drive innovation forward at Arctic Glacier. Enjoy the show. Doug, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Likewise, your business is so cool and so niche, no pun intended.
Yeah, really.
Something I have benefited from a ton because it's with Arctic Glacier and those great big bags of ice that you can get when you're running, quickly at the gas station, many a time running out to go to the lake, go to a Spartan race, etc. I've stopped it and popped and grabbed one of those. It's been a huge help, and you don't think about the necessity of it, but your business is huge and growing constantly because of serving such an important niche. So tell us a little bit first of how you even came across the company and came to be in this role you are today.
Yeah, you're right. It's a really unique industry. And I really started my career in the waste industry with Republic through Advanced. So a lot of service type distribution, not really manufacturing. What was unique about that industry was the culture, in the sense that a lot of tenured employees, a lot of M&A. So both Arctic and Republic, where I started, were really M&A companies. So 1, 2, sites growing to 10 to 20 to 50 to 100, et cetera. And so you had a lot of this unique, disparate culture everywhere that blended into one. And Arctic really reminds me of that. So it's a unique, very unique culture, but very similar. So when I got here, I felt very much at home. Kind of fell into it. So I was at another private equity company called SCA, which environmental, and had a lot of leadership turnover, board turnover. And I just had a recruiter call me and said, "Would you be interested in selling ice?" I was like, how exciting does that really sound, right? Like, you take a water, you freeze it, you put it in a bag and you sell it. What am I really going to be doing there? But then I learned that the CEO, who was new as well, really was looking for somebody that was innovative and creative and that would bring ideas to the table, work with the SLT and the SLT, allowing, the innovation to take a hold to really kind of create differentiation within the marketplace. So there's a little bit of luck falling in here, but it's been a great experience working with an unbelievable leadership team and CEO, Pete Laporte, who has just been an amazing leader and really driven us to kind of great success in the 1.5 to 2 years that he's been here.
Break down the business model a little bit more for me and those listening that don't fully understand this industry, because you're on site at a gas station, you don't own the gas station, you don't have influence in the gas station, but they need you to service their customers coming in for ice. So how does that work with especially these big barricaded ice buckets sitting out front? Do you guys own those? Or are those leased to you? How does that management work?
That's a great question. So there's about 50 to 60,000 of those out in the ecosystem in North America, basically Canada and the US. So really, if you really want to break it down, our niche is packaged ice. I believe we do it the safest. So you think of food, it's food, you put it in your mouth. Be careful what you put in your mouth, right? We go through some food quality. It's several of our plants where we actually get certified. I don't know that any other ice manufacturer can say that, but really you break it down into kind of customer types. So if you think of packaged ice, you're going to sell to the larger customers, the Walmarts, the grocery store chains, the Costcos, right? And you're going to drop big pallets of ice in a warehouse, and they're going to put it, whether it's in their inline freezer or a freezer, what we call a merchandiser in the industry, out front, right, at a 7-Eleven or, that you see. But typically, though, that's one type of customer. Then we have a DSD type customer, direct store delivery, where we will actually pull up in front of the 7-Eleven, open the door, how much ice needs to go in there, and we fill that up. So that's really kind of the two different models that we follow. We do some where we have a distributor that might deliver it, right? So like, we don't want to drive from South LA to Malibu. So we have a distributor that'll actually make the delivery. They're delivering ice cream and frozen pizzas and everything else. So they package that up. I think one of the two unique things about this industry that I didn't know coming in was you can make the craft ice too. You think of what goes in you want a bourbon, right? And you get the nice cube that's very clear. You can make them at home, but typically you're not going to get them clear. You can stamp them with company logos and things like that. So those are pretty cool. And a young man named Pete DeGrandis, who's been at our Vernon facility, we do a lot of Hollywood set things like Hallmark movies. So if you think of the opening of the Nicolas Cage movie, National Treasure, the Charlotte, and this big polar ice cap. Well, that's something Pete and team built. So they do a lot of movie type. It's not our core. It's not something that is making, but it's a niche thing that we do. We also do a lot of things around stadiums, right? So you might fill up the Rose Bowl. You might fill up the Dodger Stadium, right? Those sorts of things too. So it's kind of been a fascinating learning experience to think, oh, this is simple. Freeze water, put it in a bag, like I said, and drop it off. But there's some nuances to all of that make it a little bit more complicated. And obviously, opportunity for efficiency.
What I would assume when the Rose Bowl calls, they are educated enough in how much frozen water they need to be able to say, hey, we need X ton, whatever, of ice bags in order to get us through the Rose Bowl weekend. Instead, they're looking to you to say, hey, make sure we don't run out of ice. So in a lot of these situations, I would assume it's on you doing your own analysis of the scenario and the customer needs in that environment to make sure you're supplying enough ice. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, no, that's really fair. So if you think about those type of events, so we do things like Coachella out in the desert, right, in Palm Springs, right, festivals. We do Sturgis, the bike rally. And so what you really have to do is figure out, okay, in a lot of these events, we may park a couple 18-wheelers there that are full of ice, full of product, and that we can distribute as needed. Obviously, we have an idea based on prior sales that we can say historically. We also look at weather. So if it's raining at the Rose Bowl, they may not be selling as many Cokes as if it's 95 degrees at the Rose Bowl. And so, but we can stage things temporarily and create up staging points and then have merchandisers throughout the Rose Bowl facility or Coachella where our teams will move that product where it's needed based on the demand. And then 18-wheelers can bring product in to replace, what's going out. So you're never really going to run out of ice. The good news about ice, if you keep it cold, you can take it back, you can put it in the back stock, and you can put it out again. So a little bit of choreographed chaos, right? That goes into this because it's a lot of moving on the fly. You have to have people that are literally quick on their feet, can make quick decisions, make sure they're not running out of product, keep the customer happy. And, also if you're in the desert at Coachella, it better not melt, right? So you got to keep it cold. So yeah, there's a lot of unique things that go into those type of events to support them.
Yeah, the nice thing is it's not a true full perishable in that, it's got a shelf life of 6 months and you're done. It's just don't let it melt.
Just don't let it melt, right?
And get it back. In the situation where things have happened and, a grocery store freezer goes down and ice disappears and melts, what is typically the reaction and the scenario to go correct those situations? Is that like a fire drill, have to go run ice back out there, or
it can be. Depends on the customer, right? So obviously, like any business, it's not going to be perfect all the time. And I think another reason that sets ourselves apart is just the customer service. So I think of our Southern Cal team, led by Christian Sanchez, who is very attuned to this. So you could have our own equipment fail, right? So if the freezer's not freezing, it's hot out and all that product melts, how fast can we get a new one out, restock so they're not losing sales? It could be, to your point, an inline freezer at a Walmart that has problems and they need some back stock and how quickly we can adjust to that. So the other thing that's, you want to take some risk out of it, because if you have a product melting in front of that merchandiser, all of a sudden you got to worry about a slip and fall too. So it becomes risky for us, risky for the store, risky for the customer, right? You don't want anybody to get hurt. You don't really think of that, but obviously those are things that we want to try to avoid. That kind of led us into some of this tech innovation around those merchandisers with the sensors in there, because now I know the temperature. Now I can be proactive. I said, why is that merchandiser at 41 degrees for 8 hours? Is it 105 outside? Well, maybe that's why it's really working hard because the door's opening a lot. Or is there really a problem? Let's dispatch a tech out there, goes out with his tablet, fixes it, makes notes, notifies the customer, right? It's this kind of life cycle of that to prevent loss of product, loss of sale, as well as really keeping the employees and the customers safe too, because you don't want just water everywhere on a slick grocery store floor, right? I mean, if you've been on, you've been on those floors. So like here in Florida at Publix, right? They're slick. You don't want to add water. So those are obviously the things you're trying to avoid.
Well, in this solution you put in place, call it an edge solution, IoT,
Mm-hmm.
was really something that stood out to me when we first connected and I got introduced to the company in being the game changer for your business, competitive advantage, just even be able to manage the whole supply chain. So when it comes to the solution that you have in these different scenarios too, you've got maybe a Coachella solution you've got to roll out that's different than what you have in the gas station scenario, et cetera. What have been the main metrics, analytics that you've been tracking to be able to make sure that you're as effective as you can be by being able to have this real-time data that lets you action where ice needs to be when or what kind of technician needs to go address the situation?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's an exciting solution, and I'll start with the hardware is really very unique, and there's a lot of companies. We partner with a company called Odo Data, and they do a great job. But there's a lot of them out there, right? So and we've tried them in the past. The secret sauce is what you do with the data you get out of it versus the actual hardware. I mean, those hardware manufacturers, take your name anyone you want in that space. LiDAR, really sophisticated, a lot of cellular, really sophisticated technology. And it's great. And that's what they're good at. We're not an electronics company, so we don't build them. But we have really taken the data and created a competitive advantage, in my opinion, on what we do with it. And I think that's really, the secret sauce. So I think that the metrics that you're really ultimately trying to get to, high level, is on the distribution side. One, so just for bottom line efficiency, am I reducing labor and am I reducing the transportation costs? So trucks, gas, right? Those things, right? So really, is my distribution costs going down? And so what we've really found is, heck yeah, right? So when we piloted 1,500 out in Southern California, we did a pilot out in Bakersfield and got them in, started looking at the data, examining the data. And it's like, wow, we really now can see. So if you think about a traditional route, right? You think of a traveling salesman, right? There's 50 7-Elevens on a route, just to keep it simple. I go to one. The first one I might get to, and there might be 2 bags I need to put in. The next one I need 100 bags, then 100 bags, then 2, then 2, then 2. Not really efficient. So now that we get this demand signal coming into and creating auto orders, we're able to now make sure that we get what we call a maximum drop size, right? So we're able to say, instead of dropping off at 40% full, we can drop off at 10% full, or maybe we've been dropping it off and it's still 75% full and we're going there and it's kind of a low sale stop. So really what you're trying to do is maximize every drop or every delivery is this maximum drop size, right? So we've seen our tons per drop go up. We've seen our transportation costs go down, and it's really phenomenal in terms of what it's really created in this one pilot. And then in the process of really pushing, more and more of these out and really trying to scale this even faster, because I think the competitive advantage is humongous. It also gives us line of sight to where these assets are. So these things are cheap. And if you have 50,000 of them, I went to Alabama, math maybe not be my strong suit, but that's millions and millions of dollars if you look at that, if they're all $10,000 a piece, right? And so where are these things? And so we couldn't track them. And I mentioned kind of the customer care side and proactive fixing of them. So what we started off as, how do we drive labor and, vehicle costs out of the organization? And what we've really found is there's just so much more opportunity to leverage this. And so we've added in some more things around analytics and some other areas that have really helped us, because as you can imagine, weather and how hot it is or how cold it is, or if it's raining, or what is there a Super Bowl that weekend or a Coachella or whatever it might be, is kind of a big deal in terms of ice sales. And so what we've done is create that analytics platform and teamed it up with the IoT and really kind of trying to get this maximum value out of the technology. And it's been pretty exciting.
Yeah, I love the idea of, like, I'll call it route optimization with some of these individuals to make sure that they're on a path where it makes sense with the buckets that need the most refill and skipping the ones that don't.
Yeah.
But then weather, when I think of that, that's a data point that I think a lot of retailers miss out on, that isn't hard to access a database for at least a prediction of the next 10 days of weather. The outlier here that you mentioned that I'm curious where you can spot check is the event and the unexpected spikes in demands based on the Super Bowls in Tampa this year or Vegas or whatever. How do you know where to be, educated and efficient with the US, just as a first example, to know where there's going to be a spike based on just people's social lives?
Well, I think the biggest, what I've learned, and there's a direct correlation. We can argue how strong that correlation is, but there's a direct correlation between temperature, precipitation, blue sky, cloudy sky, rain, and ice sales, right? So I think that's the first factor. So we went back 7-8 years of historical data, down to where the customer, not just where our facility is. If you think of Southern California, LA's, from Riverside to, say Laguna Beach, or, that's a big difference. And there's a lot of microclimates in there. So it's a lot hotter in Riverside than it is in Laguna Beach. And so we can look at kind of where our customer drops are, where we deliver, and actually get weather data points for those along with historical sales, and do some machine learning to kind of draw these correlations, right? So now you're looking at, okay, the first thing was precipitation temperature versus sale, right? And the missing component was, if you think about the merchandiser, I don't know, like if I go every 10 days, I don't know what's happening between the 10 days. Does it all get dispersed on 2 days, or does it all get, is it gradual and even? Well, now with the sensor, I get updates every, 8 minutes, and you can actually see the data points of when the ice is actually moving. So for the first time, we're getting a bigger view of what the consumer is doing. And now I can correlate that to the weather pattern. So now I know day of week, weather, and in cloudy, right, around what those patterns are. And so we're continually learning that model. We added, to your point, in special events within areas. And it could be just an art festival that's downtown, whatever. It doesn't have to be the Super Bowl, which is obviously, the Super Bowl is one thing because you have people tailgating, you have ice in the arena or the stadium, and people are using it at home. Where typically the art festival, we know there may need to be some ice capacity in stores around there just for general use. So it's that sort of thing. I think the other thing that we've kind of added in there is just some pricing analytics, and just looking at, okay, what was our price at that point? And so you have this kind of now robust analytics platform. We've added, even now that we have the ability, like day of the week sales, like Matto. So if it's 90 in LA on Wednesday, great, but it's better to be 90 on Saturday, right? And sunny, right? And that's just the fact. People go to the beach, people are off work more. So that gives us a lot of insight into really the selling history. And then you really get into more predictive now. And so, it's really easy to forecast and say, okay, it's going to be like Brett Wilberg, who is our region president out west, sent me a screenshot between 98 in LA. And I don't mean Riverside, LA. I mean like downtown Santa Monica, LA, right? That's hot. And so, okay, you know that's coming. And so now it's like, how is that going to affect production? We're getting closer and closer to Memorial Day, which is our busy season. We start seeing upticks, especially in places like Canada. Like in February in Canada, you can go outside and stick your beer in the snow, I suppose. They don't even really need ice. And so obviously now that it's starting to get beautiful in Canada, people are going outdoors, et cetera. So now it's our busy season. And so how do we manage production? Like, do we have enough ice? Do we have, et cetera? The other thing with the demand signal is that comes in, as you can imagine, if it's 97 in LA, everybody's going to run out of ice quick, but we can't deliver to every customer on one day. So now we have to get predictive around how do we stagger these deliveries over 4 or 5 days so customers do not run out? Because if you try to do that manually, it's a guess. And if you try to run every route, it's inefficient. So this is a really powerful tool that really optimizes our delivery method. And it while it's a bottom line mover and shaker for sure, how do you engage the sales team to help affect the top line, right? Because this is something you can sell and say, we have this technology, it's unique, and you can have visibility. Like, we could show customers what their merchandisers look like. They could watch them. So if you're a buyer of 8 stores and you want to watch that and it's important to you, you can. But we can pretty much guarantee you're not going to run out of ice. That if you have this technology, this is another way to sell. So we're trying to use it for that way. And then really kind of the future state is think of Uber surge pricing. So now if it gets really hot, now some we have national, like, you're not going to go to Walmart and do surge pricing because we have a contract, but you have a lot of independents, like if your merchandise is 30% full of ice and you want more ice, normally we deliver you at 10 and you want it now, instead of $1 a bag, maybe I charge you $2 a bag and we guarantee you we'll get it there. So there's all these new opportunities and different ways to sell and to drive efficiency that the industry's never really had before because of this new technology that's come out.
I want to switch gears a little bit now to your perspective coming into your CIO role as less of, like you mentioned, the ice guy and more of someone to serve what private equity is looking to accomplish in the business, which you've, I think, made a lot of moves positively with by this solution with IoT. But how does this private equity involvement and being so closely involved with the board and the executive leadership impact your day-to-day as a IT leader to be thinking business first over necessarily the next new shiny object or being too focused on the product even?
It's a great question. And the folks in private equity are wonderful to work with. I've had the chance to work with Warburg, and I've had a chance to work with now Carlyle. And at Carlyle, the model there is a little bit different than I experienced at Warburg. Warburg was a little bit more day-to-day hands-on. Not to say that Warburg or Carlyle is not, engaged. They certainly are. But I think they trust the management team to articulate a strategy and to kind of, hit targets. I think the whole key to technology and private equity is value creation. And look, it's not about keeping lights on. I think I'm not, you get into large environments and, Fortune 200 companies, and they've got, they've got bigger IT budgets than we have revenue. Then, keeping the lights on and up and operational is important. But I think we're less focused on that. And I tend to like to think of it as I want my team focused on solving business problems, not worrying about if a router's up or down or et cetera. So when I started, our size company, having 25 people on the IT team is pretty large. I mean, I came from Republic, one of my jobs where we had 150 people reporting to you, 75 overseas doing development or whatever, right? And I wasn't even a CIO, right? So I think what I did here was I had 15 to 18 people keeping the lights on. I'm like, this is a waste of money, and it's a waste of these folks' time. These folks were very talented. So we tried to help them shift to a new role and create some value for them outside the organization so they could transition out. If not, we obviously took care of them. I mean, they're people, they're important, and you've got to be a good steward of that. But I don't need a service desk internal. I mean, for 50, 60 grand, I can have a third party service desk, right? That is 24/7, include ServiceNow or whatever flavor you want, right? So it's that type of, that was kind of our first step. And the second step, it was just, how do we create value? And what's interesting is there was really two steps. And it was one being, first month we were out in a leadership meeting and it was like, what are the initiatives that we're doing? And because I had run PMOs before, I said, look, I'll help govern this process. And so we put together 40 plus initiatives, right? Eventually whittled that down to, 20, with about 8 being spotlight projects, and really started presenting to the board, these 8 spotlight projects are going to drive X amount of value, and really execute that. And some weren't even IT. Some might be an insurance strategy, right? So our safety teams driving down safety numbers and accidents and claims, right, really can decrease your risk profile, which helps your insurance costs, to some of the IoT things. So we worked together as a team, put this governance around it, and ran this PMO governance process to really drive value. And I think the second part of it is working with the team from the CEO down to VPs, down to the, to even drivers. What are really the inefficiencies, or what problems can we solve, even if it's maybe sales at its top line? Like how do we create? And we all came up with these ideas around, how do we look at sensors? How do we look at analytics? And we drove this project. And so communicating that to the board and our parallel partners really got their attention, because I think historically at Arctic, with they never really had that from IT, right? It was, oh, here's a cybersecurity posture. Well, that's important, but we're not guarding Coke formula, and we're not guarding KFC's secret recipe. It's water, bag, whatever, right? It's ice. Like I think everyone knows how to make it. So yes, we got to cut, safeguard our customer data. Like I'm not an anti-security, I'm not, but I mean, we're safeguarding customers, our financials, and our employees, right? And all that's SaaS, so it's really kind of not on me. So, we really focus, the 10 of us are focused on how do we drive value. And I think the Carlyle partners have really enjoyed that. I know that Pete, our CEO, Pete Laporte, has actually given talks at Carlyle events about what we're doing around the technology footprint. We're an ICE company, right? And Carlyle has, many sophisticated tech companies, right? It's a large holdings, of assets. So it's great for that Pete is able to share that. And like I said, it's a team thing. It's not an IT thing or a me thing. I think the difference is with a publicly traded company, it's not as nimble, right? So at Republic, by the time it got big, to do something like literally, we sat around and started talking about IoT. By the next week, we were engaged in moving. Like at Republic, that would have taken like 6 months, right? It would have just committees and steering this and that and financial analysis. And that's all great, publicly traded and huge organization, right? 15, 1,000 sites or whatever they were at the time when I left. So it's just a different model. And I so much more enjoy this. This is so much more fun, more nimble, more quick. And it's great. Pete and his SLT embraces failure. We're going to fail at some of these things. We've done some AI things and some analytics things before we got to it. Didn't work well. Some did. So it's been great. It's a great experience working in PE, and it's kind of where I'd like to stay for sure.
Well, you've done a great job involving strategic partners to increase your scale beyond having to, increase headcount as well. Mm-hmm. Folks like Salesforce and the devices that you use, things like that. What is your take and your approach in seeking out these partners and bringing them into the fold to really become an extension of what your team is doing?
So yeah, the partners we use is super critical. First you start with what I call IT ops, just kind of steady state IT, service desk, network monitoring, data circuits, things like that. And we have a great partner. I've used that partner in other places very successfully, and they've always done a great job. So it's just that relationship. I think the key to some of those partnerships is the account team, in the sense that I think if you flipped out our account rep, we could get a bad one, and that could be, it's just not a good fit anymore, because that account rep knows how to navigate and works with us. That account rep also listens and doesn't, they're not trying to sell me something immediately. Like, hey, these are the 85 things. She was able to listened to what our need was and said, well, these are the solutions we have that could help you with those problems that you're trying to solve now. So it's probably hard for some to just focus on that and not say, hey, I got a shiny AI tool or machine learning or some sort of cloud, this, that, and the other. Those are all great, but she took care of those needs. And now she has opportunity to expand that relationship. And then some, are new. You just meet through contacts, and it's, we have a partner that is, their former, Carlisle portfolio, companies, right? That they, when their company was purchased, they kind of went out and started their own little niche consulting firm in the technology space. Amazing talent, all over North and South America. A great leadership. Again, partners are they operate like our team. So they're the ones that really help with IoT and a lot of integration, lots of all the AI automation we did in orders and saved millions on that. So they've just been an amazing partner. And I mean, that's what it is. We have daily stand-ups with them. We have twice a week, we meet with them kind of on like a standing, status type call. They come to requirement sessions, right? It's just, they're just part of the team. We don't even differentiate that they're X and we're Y. It's just, and I think that's what really works best. And it really all came down to listening. And so I think picking a partner that will listen and then solve is better than just selling. And I think, again, comes down to who your relationship is with and can they build that relationship and that trust. So that's how I've tended to work the last 5-6 years. Love to find the partners. I know you don't like the V word, but I don't want to deal with a V, but I do like the partner, right? And that's really, you find this successful. So,
yeah, I don't think it's going to be a vendor approach or RFP world too much longer. It's got to be partnership first with being so many options. Definitely got to be the focus. So, And this is a good segue for my favorite final question, which is around principles. And I'm curious, what is the guiding principle that you live by to be successful in business?
Yeah. And so it really comes back to kind of a leadership philosophy in that, in the sense that, and this is something that I have worked on a lot. And then very recently, through Arctic Glacier, our CEO, Pete Laporte, has brought in a leadership coach too, that works with us as a group and individually. And we have cohorts, down the line. And I was thankful that it very much aligned with me. So there's really kind of 3 pillars to this. To me, it's trust. Like if can I believe that you say you're going to do something and that you're actually going to do it? Do I believe that you have the knowledge to act? Do I trust that you have the knowledge to actually make that assessment? And I think building that trust is just humongous. And it leads to some tough conversations, but tough conversations that are needed and debates that have to happen, especially in a very strong functioning team. I think what I've learned I've always looked at CEOs that are just kind of dictate a little bit, like this is what I believe, and push that down. And what Pete's taught me about the trust part is that I trust this team to make collective decisions. I may agree or disagree. And ultimately, if I agree strong enough, obviously he's the leader. He's going to make a final call. But a lot of the successes we've built have been built as a team, not just the CEO dictating. And that's a tribute to him because he's got a wealth of knowledge. I think 2 is transparency. And I mean, if you're not transparent, I'm very transparent to a fault with my team. I mean, obviously, if you get in M&A situations and you've signed NDAs, there's things you cannot say. Otherwise, I come back from a board meeting, I share what we said at the board. That's able to say. I share down to the system engineers, to whoever that is willing to listen, and just be very transparent. When you have to make tough decisions, you're just transparent about it. Our leadership team's the same way. Back to that trust factor. I trust that if I say something and I'm transparent, I'm going to be heard and listened to. So I think, and then it's collaboration, which just seems simple, but it's hard. And I break it almost down to listening. Listening is probably the hardest skill in the world, especially for executives. They all want to talk. Nobody really wants to listen. And so I try to really, I think my wife, for example, is going to be a much better CIO than me. Like she's in technology as well, and she's unbelievably talented. And the best thing I can do for her is to not just, okay, this is what you do, is to listen, right? And then I'll collaborate and maybe offer a suggestion. But she's going to forge her own world. And it's great to have this collaboration between, partners like that. Same in a big leadership team. So I would say trust, transparency, collaboration are the principles that I've kind of developed over the years and will continue to take with me through my career.
Doug, you're such an inspiration. This has been so much fun. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's been great to have the discussion and awesome to meet you.